Welcome to the Simply Vegan podcast, brought to you by the team at Vegan Food and Living, the UK's best-selling vegan magazine. I'm Holly Johnson, and each Tuesday I get together with my colleague Molly Pickering to share what we've been eating, what's got us thinking, and the new products that are worth trying. And don't miss our Thursday podcast, where we chat to some of the leading names in veganism. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, we'd love it if you hit the subscribe button, as it helps us to rate in the charts. It also means you'll be alerted to every new episode of your favourite podcast. If you're anything like me, life can quickly become chaotic, and finding fresh and nutritional vegan recipes can become another thing to add to the to-do list. Our best-selling magazine, Vegan Food and Living, is on hand to help. You can join us today and try an issue for just 99p by visiting veganfoodandliving.com/podcast or using code podcast when you order with us. You'll not only receive the magazine to your door, but also have access to thousands of plant-based recipes at your fingertips in our digital magazine archive, which is fully searchable and simple to use. Join us today and make cooking delicious vegan food that bit more exciting by visiting veganfoodandliving.com/podcast. So for today's episode, I'm very excited to say we're joined by Patrik Baboumian, who is the star of The Game Changers and one of the world's strongest men. Hello, Patrik. Thanks for joining us. How are you?
Hi. How are you? I'm good. I'm as good as you can be in a situation like this where the world is on fire. But I'm coping with it.
Yeah, I know. It's just terrible, isn't it? I see on your Instagram that you were out protesting. Is it in Germany you live?
Yeah. I'm very near to Berlin. I'm just half an hour outside of the city, basically. So I joined the protest in Berlin. I think that's something that can also help. Just basically not feel as helpless as you would do if you just sit in front of the TV and basically get hypnotized by the terrible news that you get. It's better to go out, and also this way you can connect with people who are actually, and like Ukrainians who are actually part of this tragedy. So it's great to connect with them and then see where there's a chance to help in some way. There are so many ways how you can help people, so it's always great to just connect and then use tragic moments like this just as an opportunity to basically show a better side of yourself. I think that's what it is. Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, I don't live near a city. I'm in quite a rural area, but there's huge collections going on all around me, and it's just it's amazing seeing everyone kind of come together to try and help.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's talk about your journey then. You started weight training at a really young age, didn't you? Was it 9?
No, I was 14. I was 14 when I really seriously started training. I was always, I think, basically most kids are probably fascinated by strength. Like the claim that my dad is the world's strongest man. That is something that probably every boy has said at some time in his life. And usually you don't hear my dad is the world's fastest man or the world's, I don't know, has the longest beard or so. They always say the strongest man, because strength seems to be something that is just hardwired into, at least when we were kids, it's hardwired into our psyche that we are fascinated by, strength. And for me, it was also connected to stuff that were happening when in my very early childhood. So one of those things is I lost my dad in a very early age. I was 4 years old when we had a car accident, and everybody in the car died except my mom. So my little sister was in the car, my dad was in the car, my mom was very severely injured. That was just one episode, but also when I was born, that was exactly when the Iran-Iraq war started. So that was also something that was just a backdrop of my childhood, hearing bombings and, all that stuff that as a child just is very hard to understand and very hard to. So So as a child, I had a lot of basically helplessness that I would, in these situations, and when terrible things would happen, I would feel a lot of helplessness. And my way of escapism and of, getting away from that was superhero comics. So I would escape in this, fantastic world where there were, creatures who were insanely strong and who had the ability to, even withstand military forces and fight against them. Like the Hulk is oftentimes depicted, fighting against tanks and stuff like that. So as a child, that was kind of, I would identify with that. And that was something that I connected very strongly to. And I think that has a lot to do with me then later on, continuing to be fascinated by strength, but then also starting to train and starting to become strong myself and, do that as a sport.
Gosh, that's quite a story. I mean, it's absolutely tragic. So sorry to hear, such a young age, but you've obviously channeled that into, I mean, I guess a lot of kids are inspired by Marvel characters, but not a lot of them actually kind of turn themselves into one, as it were. But yeah, I suppose, when you've had that kind of trauma, then it does really shape the rest of your life, doesn't it? So you start working out, you start getting strong. You're eating meat at the time, presumably as a teenager. What led you to kind of think, actually, meat isn't the best thing for me?
So strength training was one pretty big part of my life. And, as I said, it's rooted very early on. Another thing that is rooted in my childhood is my fascination and love for animals. So as a child, and then also already as a child, I wouldn't discriminate between, like a lot of people have, discriminate between different species of animals. Like pets are cute, and then everything that crawls in the ground and bugs and stuff like that, not so cute. I didn't have that. I never had that. So while I must say that in sometimes as a child, I would actually do terrible things to bugs, because as a child, you don't understand that you can't hear them scream. So things might hurt them, but you don't understand that as a small kid. But what I was still really fascinated. So I would, I was very, very young. I would go in the garden and just grab all kinds of little critters and all kinds of bugs and earthworms and all kinds of things. And I would just stuff them into my pockets. So my mom would find me, with all kinds of little animals on my body. So I had this fascination for non-human life, non-human animal life, basically, from a very early age. And then later on, I met my ex-girlfriend at that time, and we were living at her parents' house, and it was basically almost in the middle of a forest. So it was very near to a big forest. So that love for animals was still there, and she was also a big animal lover. So what happened is that we were, rescuing wildlife because, you find a lot of wildlife there that, has some injury or something. Yeah. So we would have hedgehogs and all kinds of birds. And at the point where I started to think about my meat consumption, we actually had a little baby raven. So we had this baby bird, and we're trying to get him on his feet because when we found him, he was ill and injured and, had bugs crawling on him and didn't really look as if he was in a good shape. So we took him home and had him for a few weeks and tried to get him in a better shape to then release him again. And at that time, that took, I think, like in the end, it took something like 2 months or so. So at that time, I really started to reflect on my meat consumption, because I just realized that on the one hand, I loved animals, and I would, when I would see them in distress, I would have the immediate response to try to help and try to do something about it. And then on the other hand, I would go and buy meat and eat it. And I knew an animal has to die for that in order for me to do that. So I really started to question that. And of course, I came to the conclusion that it didn't make any sense what I was doing.
Yeah.
So in the end, it came down to one question. And the question for me was, because one thing that I'm always, very, that is really important to me is to be honest with myself, basically, to not, fool myself into some irrational thing or something that is not logic. So for me, it came down to the question, if I would have to kill every animal that I'm eating, if I would have to kill them myself, would I do it or wouldn't I? And that was a clear no. So I thought, well, then I'm just fooling myself because I'm paying someone else to do something that I wouldn't do.
Yeah.
That's just very dishonest. So I didn't feel good about it. So that was just the reason where I said, okay, I'm going to stop eating meat. And it really had nothing to do with my sport and with my, love for training and all that stuff. Because to be honest, I was pretty convinced at that time that it would hurt, stopping to eat meat would hurt my performances. But at that time, I wasn't doing any competitions. I was actually trying to get my A degree so that I could go to the university. I was doing that in an evening school, and at the same time I was working. And then I also had a second job on the weekends, so I had a lot of things, so training was really not important at that time. So although I was expecting it to hurt my training, I didn't really care because obviously, your values are more important than your muscle, at least for me. So I did it, and then I was totally shocked because so it was just basically a little bit before. It was while I was doing my last tests for my A degree. And then I got it and I started studying. And that's basically in that transition time was when I became vegetarian. And then in the next 6 months, I really, really exploded in terms of my performances. So I got heavier, I got stronger. I was doing really well in training. And that was very unexpected, as I already said. So that was really the reason that I was motivated to start competing in strongman competitions, because at that time I found out there was a lightweight category. Lightweight for a strongman means up to 105 kilos.
Right.
Those guys are pretty heavy. So at 105 kilos was basically my body weight. So I thought, okay, well, if there's this, weight cap, I might be able, because usually a strongman is a huge guy. They're very tall, traditionally. And I was a strongman fan as a child, being someone who was fascinated with strength. I was as a child already, even before I touched the dumbbell for the first time, I was a strongman fan. I would watch it on TV.
Right.
But I never thought that I would be able to compete with these guys, because to me, they were like giants, and I'm a pretty short guy. So, finding out about this lightweight category, I thought, well, I'm doing so well right now in training. Why don't I give this a shot? So, went for it, broke the national record in the log lift, which was basically most of the time my best event right in the first season that I competed. And then in the second season, I won the lightweight category in Germany. So overall. And I did that 2 years later again. So I was lightweight champion for 2 times. And then I decided that was in 2010, I decided to go to the heavyweight category, because at that time, the competition in Germany wasn't really the level wasn't that high. So as a lightweight, the interesting in Germany is when you're a lightweight, you actually compete with the heavyweights on the same competition. You do basically the same things. And then in the end of the competition, you get a placing for your weight category, but you also get an overall placing compared to the heavyweight guys.
Okay.
So as a lightweight. Every time that I would win, I was also 5th in the overall. So only 4 of the heavy guys were actually better. So that's why in 2010, I thought, well, I can give this a shot. I mean, I'm a dwarf against them, but I'm doing pretty well as a lightweight. So if I go a little bit heavier, I might be able to be competitive.
Yeah. And
then in the first year in the heavyweights, I was runner-up champion. And in the second year, that was 2011, I won it. And at that time, I was, vegetarian for quite a long time. There was a break in between where I fell back to eating meat for a few months because I was experiencing a lot of health issues as a vegetarian, and I didn't really know where they came from. So I thought, well, I might want to try to get back to my old diet and see if it, does anything. It didn't do anything. So it was a few months, and I got back to being vegetarian. Later on, when I went vegan, I actually found out those problems were because of the massive amounts of dairy that I was consuming. But at that time, I didn't really understand that. So in 2011, I win basically Germany's Strongest Man, the title for as a vegetarian, and that was, of course, for a lot of people, like basically a sensational surprise. And I would have a lot of headlines and all kinds of big newspapers, and I would be invited to all kinds of TV shows because I was a freak for most people. So this guy who somehow is the strongest guy in the country right now. So how is that possible? Everybody would want to ask me that.
Yeah.
And what I realized in that time, and now I have to say, when I went vegetarian, I never intended to be an activist. So it was just a private decision. As I said, it was really just me questioning my own behavior and, just trying to be true to myself and my values. But I was never intending to be someone who is, going to change the world in a way or, try to inspire other people. I was just doing that for myself. I would always mention it in the competitions when, usually you have kind of a host who, hosts the thing, and I would, and they give you cards to mention some personal stuff on that they can then mention when they're hosting the show. And I would always mention that I'm vegetarian because I knew I was the only one. So I was trying to represent in a way.
Yeah.
But I didn't see myself as an activist. But then when I won the title and I had all these, media coverage and all this attention all of a sudden, and what's really important is I was getting a lot of feedback all of a sudden from people telling me, wow, they saw me on TV speaking about, being compassionate with animals and being the strongest guy in the country. And that kind of liberated them because mostly young guys, they were afraid of being compassionate or, saying that they're compassionate, because that is something, at least at that time, that's 10 years ago now. The world has changed a little bit since then. But at that time, there would be something that, would make them look soft, would make them look less manly.
It's that kind of toxic masculinity, isn't it? And I think
that stupidity where, you have to be an asshole to be a real man, basically. That's the easy way to put it. Okay. So and what I realized is that because I was in this position to be the strongest guy in the country, I was liberating all these young guys because, I was just showing that compassionate side of myself. And that gave them, the permission to be outspoken about their own, softer side and not being ridiculed at, because then they could say, well, you think that's funny? Tell that to the strongest guy in the country.
Yeah.
So when I realized that, I thought, well, this is really powerful. And I think I really want to use this to, if I'm already inspiring people, I want to do that in the best way I can. And at that time, I knew that if it comes to, reducing animal suffering, being vegetarian is just, not even half the answer. It's just really just the first step. Because if you take a look at how eggs are produced, you take a look at how dairy is produced and, all kinds of other animal products, it's terrible. So there's animal suffering all over the animal industry, wherever you look. So if you want to do the job correctly there, you want to be a vegan. And I think the most crucial part basically there was that PETA approached me, when I won the title, and they wanted to do some kind of pro-vegetarian campaign with me. And I told them, well, there's two things that need to happen before I can do that. The first thing is I don't want to make anyone feel bad. So I'm not going to do a campaign where I'm shaming people or anything like that, because I don't think that is something that works.
No,
basically.
Yeah, I agree.
Not because I don't feel it. Like I have a lot of anger in myself when I look at the world and what people are doing. But I know it's not convincing to basically, just use a megaphone to pull all that anger out there. That's not going to do anything. So I said, it's got to be funny, and it's got to be, something that is more inspiring than. So that was my first thing. And then the second thing was, I said, I'm not going to do a pro-vegetarian campaign. I want to do a pro-vegan campaign. But first I have to go vegan. So you have to wait for me to go vegan. And then we can do that. And they did it. They waited. And then I was basically I was just smashing my head and trying to find out how to make this whole message funny in a way. And then I actually myself came up with this thing that was then basically the claim of the campaign was the strongest animals in the world are plant eaters, gorillas, buffaloes, elephants, and I.
Yeah,
so
true.
And my idea was actually to show these animals and then have me stand basically besides. But then they said, well, it would be probably funnier if we just make it a claim, and then there's this picture of you, and that's what became the campaign. And that was basically like the crucial point where I made the decision, and I said, okay, if I'm going to start being an activist, if I'm going to start trying to inspire people, I want to do the best job that I can. Now, the scary part about that was, again, like when I went vegetarian, I was again not convinced that it would actually work. But when I went vegetarian, my training wasn't important. But this time I was basically on the highest point of my career.
Yeah.
And I was really terrified that I would do it and it wouldn't work. And I would be in the spotlight of everyone and just fail.
Yeah.
So
because really you went scary. Vegan.
Yeah, that was really scary. So what I did is I just took my idea was I made the decision in late summer, like or early fall, and my idea was I would take some time until the end of the year, and I would basically switch in 2012. That was the initial plan. I needed that time to find out how I could reinvent my whole, diet and everything. The most problematic thing for me was there really wasn't a vegan, strength athlete who was internationally successful at that time or in the time before. So it was really unprecedented. So I thought, well, if nobody has done it yet, it's probably impossible. So
yeah.
see if it works or not. I took that time, but then I actually didn't need all that time. So I made the cut in December 1st of 2011. So that's when I made the cut. And then I think in 2012, we did the PETA campaign, if I remember correctly. And then the rest is history, because again, I was completely shocked by how, all my fears were really baseless. And as I said, I had some problems when I was vegetarian with all the dairy that I was consuming, iron deficiency being one, because dairy just, in big amounts blocks iron intake. I would even take supplements and I would still be deficient. It just went away when I went vegan. I had some concentration issues. They went away. I was doing great. And then there was basically 5 more years where I was competing, because right now I'm not, I'm retired now. I'm doing other things. But I competed until 2016. So there was half a decade where I was still competing. I was still doing well. In the German circuit, I placed third in the next 2 years. But that's in strongman. You have to also know that there's not every competition is the same. So there are a lot of events, and in every competition there's just like 5 of maybe 100 events that could possibly be part of the competition. So every competition is completely different. So it's really hard to kind of take that as a measure and say, well, he didn't win the title again, so that's he obviously didn't get stronger. A better measure to see that is if you take just basically your numbers in the gym and in competitions, and what you would see there is that I was increasing my numbers and my performances in every lift for 5 years. So it was the strongest I've ever been 5 years after going vegan. And of course, that was not something that I expected.
No. Why do you think that was then? I mean, what were you sort of, obviously we're cutting out the eggs and the dairy, which we know dairy is sort of linked to numerous health problems, isn't it? And inflammation and things like that. But what were you adding in that you think helped you?
I think you don't really have to add in anything. The logic is pretty plain and simple. You have to do it right, and doing it right means you understand what macronutrients are, you understand what micronutrients are, and how the body works and what it needs to perform. You give your body everything that you were giving it before going vegan, basically. So you make sure you get enough protein, you make sure you get all your vitamins. You just use plant sources to do all that. Okay? So that means you're vegan now. And what happens is you still got everything that your body needs to work. All the good stuff is still there, but you're just cutting out stuff like dairy that, causes problems, like I explained, and eggs, cause other problems, and meat that causes, that stays in the stomach for way too long and causes inflammation. So you're basically just taking out all the bad stuff. And then also another important thing is, that if you take a look statistically on, pathogens in food, 80% of those pathogens, like salmonella and stuff like that, it's always associated with animal foods.
Exactly.
So, basically everything that hurts your body is usually somehow associated with animal foods. And you take all of that away, but your body still gets all the good stuff. Of course, you're going to do better. So that's something that a lot of people misunderstand, because they think like, when I tell them about it, they think the message is that you go vegan and then miraculously somehow you get super strong. That's of course not the case. You have to do the homework, and you have to do it right. But if you do it right, it's going to always be better than with animal products, because with animal products you just the whole package just includes so much stuff that hurts the body. Of course, there's also vitamins in animal products, and there's also good stuff in them, but they also always come with baggage. Yeah. And with plant foods, it's not the same. Plant foods usually have overall a way better package, and don't hurt the body as much. So that's just, I would say that's the reason why I was doing better than before.
Yeah. So what's your diet like then? What do you eat, on an average day?
Yeah. So I grew up, I'm born in Iran. I'm Armenian. And then when I was 7, we came to Germany. So my mom usually, when she cooked, she would cook a lot of Persian dishes and stuff like that. And then I always loved Indian cuisine, so everything, and also everything that is really hot and spicy. So I've even as a child, I already would eat very, very hot food. Right. So that's something that is still there. So I love everything that really hurts the tongue. And then everything that is crispy is also great.
Yeah.
And now I'm married to a German wife, so we also cook a lot of European influenced foods, but we both like a lot of variety. So we actually eat more Asian influenced stuff. It's but I think my favorites are mostly Indian dishes. One of my favorites is, for instance, it's just basically a stew of it's a tandoori chickpea stew, basically, and it's tandoori and curry spices, and then I just eat that with rice, and that gives me a lot of protein. It gives me good fats, gives me a lot of carbs and also a lot of fiber. So it's a great dish. Really tastes well. And so basically, I would say I eat a lot of legumes with a lot of rice. Okay. If I want to make it really short.
Yeah.
and then also from time to time, fake meats and meat replacements and stuff like that, because it's mostly really not because I'm missing the meat or anything. but it's just so easy to, because you don't have to reinvent a lot of stuff if you just replace the real thing with something else that has the same nutrients, basically. And that just makes it way easier. So especially for someone who transitions, it's so much easier to do it that way than to try to really reinvent every single meal and, do everything from scratch. Yeah. So that's also a big part of, how I eat.
So you've been working with Greenforce, haven't you? Who it's a company that we actually reviewed on last week's episode. And it's kind of like meat replacements, but it's in a powdered mix, isn't it? So it's really good in terms of like sort of low carbon footprints, packaging, things like that. And you just add water, don't you? And then kind of make up your own sausages or meatballs or burgers or fish cakes. They've got like loads in the range. So you'd recommend those as like a good high protein sort of thing to have in your diet if you're trying to build muscle?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the reasons why I decided to work with Greenforce is, well, reason number one was I just tried the products that they had back when I started working with them. It was just 3 products that they had. Now they have, I don't know, like 30 or something like that. Yeah. They have a whole variety of, international things and all kinds of stuff. So, but back then it was just basically 3 products. So one was the burger, and then there was I don't know what the English word for it is. What it was in German, it's Frikadelle. I don't know. I have to look it up.
Meatballs. Yeah, my mother-in-law's Danish, and they call it frikadelle, meatballs.
Yeah. So that's that, and then they had the ground meat, basically. And I tried the product, especially the burger patty. I was just blown away. It was really the best burger patty that I have ever tasted. And I have to say, I'm probably also a little bit special with the taste that I have. So as I said, I don't at all miss the taste of meat. So when it comes to meat replacements, for me, it's great if they're close, but I don't want them to be that close that I don't know anymore if it's meat or if it isn't.
Yeah,
so I don't want to be unsure. So for me, it's the burger is just great because it's not like over the top meaty. It's not like, like the Beyond Meat burger where you have blood in it and it's like, I'm sorry, but I would find that gross. It's just too close to me, right? Nothing against them, but that's just my taste. So for me, it was just really the perfect patty. I ate way too much of it. So that was really the reason number one, because as I said, for me, it's really important to always be true to myself. So I cannot go out and, tell people, advertise something that I really don't like and don't believe in myself. So that was important for me, that I would really like the products. And then another reason was that this system with that you get a powder instead of getting the finished product. It just, ecologically, it just makes so much sense because, transport costs are lower. The packaging is also, very sustainable. And then you make it when you need it. So it doesn't have to be refrigerated. So that's another reason why you need less energy. So that's something that I really like. And then the final thing is, because the powder usually has a very, it's different for the different mixes, depends what the product is, but most of the products are pretty low in fat and very high in protein and fiber. So that's the base product that you have, and then you add some fat into it. What that means is that as an athlete, when my diet is changing over time. So sometimes I want to gain weight, and then sometimes I want to lose weight. So I can really, customize the product to my needs. So that is something really, really great as well, that I get this control over, how the micronutrients in the product are. That's also something very unique, of course. If you buy a product that is already, done, you don't have that.
Yeah, some burgers are so soaked in fat. I did some last night, actually, or my husband did, and I was just trying to pat it all out with some kitchen roll because I was just horrified at how fatty they were. So I think, a lot of us kind of think, oh, it's processed, it's bad. But one thing we try and sort of say on the podcast is that not all processed products are the same.
Yeah, that's right. It's just not black and white. It's also like there can be huge problems with going 100% raw, for instance. So when I look at vegans that fail, that try veganism and then fail, and a lot of them like do that very publicly, most of the cases that I know are raw vegans. And I think that has to do with the fact that, going 100% raw really makes it so much harder to do it. And there's really no good reason. Like to go 100% vegan, there are very good ethical reasons for it. If it's, social justice, generational justice, the animals, environment, there are so many good reasons for it. But going 100% raw, not really good reasons. So what you're doing is you're making it so much harder for yourself. But there's really no good reasons. And then they would, of course, say, well, it's healthier. And I would disagree with that because it's healthy to have a lot of unprocessed food in your diet. But I don't really think it's healthy to go 100% because there are some foods where it just makes sense to process them. Because, like, for instance, soy, it just makes a lot of sense to process it because if you don't process it, there's a lot of problematic stuff in it that you have to cook it. You have to do something with it. Potatoes is the same. You cannot just take potatoes and eat them. So I don't think it's healthier. And at the same time, it's making it so much harder. So, and I'm a big believer in making things easy and as comfortable as possible for people, because I know most people are just they're stressed. They have a lot to do. They have a very busy life. So for them, it's hard to, like, as an athlete, I can, have my life circle around my diet and basically give that aspect of my life a lot of room because it's an important aspect of my life as an athlete. But if you're someone who is just, trying to survive in this busy, noisy world, you just sometimes need something that is easy and that just gives your body what it needs. So I'm really a big believer in if we want veganism to succeed, we have to make it easy for people and, accessible as possible.
Yeah, such a good point. Let's just talk quickly about the Game Changers. So what impact has this had? I watched it again the other night just to remind myself of it. I mean, it's just incredible seeing you carrying those 4 guys along. I'm just like, what? Yeah, what impact has it had for you personally?
It's so the funny thing with the film is that James Wilkes, the producer and the narrator basically of the whole thing, he had the idea to make this film back in 2012. So he basically went vegan the same time that I went vegan, and he connected with me pretty early on, and that was the time where he did all this research, and he just basically, couldn't believe that everything that he had believed in for his whole life basically all of a sudden seemed to be flawed and just BS. So he contacted me and he had this idea to make this film about, and it was really in the beginning, it was very centered on the idea to give a different view of masculinity, basically. The idea was, let's take athletes who are in very, stereotypically masculine sports like fighting and weightlifting and stuff that you usually, associate with masculinity, and then basically use that as a vehicle to give a different, view on, because back in the day, there was this stigma about veganism, as I already, spoke about in the beginning of this interview, that it is something very feminine, and vegans are basically not very manly. The idea was to kind of debunk that was the core idea of the whole thing, and then it developed into something way bigger and way more broad. When we started, actually, so he contacted me and asked me if I would want to be part of it, and I immediately said yes, because basically the idea of the film was exactly what I was trying to do in public. I was trying to achieve the same goal, but I was just doing it with interviews and stuff like that, and competitions. And he was trying to make a film as a platform for that. So I said I would do it. And we actually basically, when we did it the first time, it was just him. It was just one person with a camera. So it was just him with a camera. He just came and we did an interview. We trained together, and he filmed all of that. And then with time, so when it was published, I think that was in 2019. So with time, it just got bigger and bigger and bigger because it basically gathered more and more traction until we reached the point where James Cameron came on board. And then it, of course, exploded into something way bigger than before. Yeah. So that was just basically the course of events. And for me, it was just so great to see, because if it was something that we would have produced in 1 year or 2 years, then this, the kind of explosion that happened after it was published with, my own life and everything around myself, it would have been even more shocking. But this way, it was kind of something that I could see coming, because we started working on it in 2012, and then it came out like 7 years later.
Wow,
so
yeah, that's a long time.
I was seeing that grow, and I was expecting everything that happened. I was expecting that to happen. A lot of attention, a lot of love, but also a lot of backlash from people who didn't like the whole message, of course. You always have those. And I expected all of it, and it all came true.
Right. Arnold Schwarzenegger was involved as well, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was, exactly. He was an executive producer. He's, of course, a buddy of James Cameron's. So that was, I think that was basically the way that he got into it. And also at that time, I think he was just recovering from a heart surgery. And he was using a predominantly vegetarian kind of diet. So he was never 100% vegetarian or anything, but he was cutting back on meat a lot. So he would, eat way less meat for health reasons. So that's the angle that we had with his interview and having him in the film.
I think so many people, especially men, watched that film and decided to either cut down their meat intake or, really take the plunge and go vegan. Building muscle, it's not just about looking good, is it? There was a Guardian article published yesterday with a study about the fact that half an hour of muscle strengthening activity, like lifting weights or even just, I think it quoted heavy gardening. You need to do quite a lot of heavy gardening to get to your size. Yeah. But it helps reduce the risk of dying from any cause by as much as a fifth, which is insane. So why is that? Yeah. Why is muscle so important?
Yeah, I think I'm not sure if it's the muscle itself. Of course, once you get older, the body starts to, lose a lot of muscle at some point. So that's when, if you have some kind of physical activity, and the gym is just a great way to do that because it's very controlled. The injury risk is less than, with gardening. There's always some stuff that can happen. You can drop something on your foot or True. Whatever it is. Yeah, so you're just basically mimicking what a human being would normally do in the wild, right? So when we would live in the jungle, we would have to lift a lot of heavy stuff. We would have to, probably run away from some animals who want to eat us. Yeah. And if we would actually want to eat another animal, we would have to catch it.
Yeah.
So that's very different. That's very different from the way of life that we have in a civilized world where, you get everything basically just comes into your mouth prepared. So, of course, if you're closer to that natural kind of way of life that our body was actually designed for, that's always going to be better for us. And what gym training does is just give you a very safe way to give the body the stimuli that it needs to, stay healthy and stay functioning on a high level. And then how high that level is, that's, basically then up to everybody, up to yourself. Some people just want to stay healthy, and then some people go insane like I did for a lot of years. But today I'm also more leaning towards just trying to stay healthy.
Yeah. Have a nice rest. Oh, Patrik, it's been absolutely amazing to speak to you. I really could chat to you just all day long. Your story is just so, inspiring. Just to finish, what tips would you give to anyone who wants to build muscle on a plant-based diet? What should they be including? Protein powder, anything like that?
Yeah. So usually when people have a hard time with muscle building and a plant-based diets, it's because they're not eating the right amount of macronutrients that they need. Because with plant foods, usually a lot of especially healthy foods, they come with a lot of fiber or with a lot of water. Like if you take veggies, they come with a lot of water and a lot of volume. So that makes it hard to get enough actual calories into your body to be able to perform and train and build muscle. And in order to do that, it's really not that hard. You just have to choose the right sources, which means basically legumes for protein, grains also for protein, but also for good carbs. And then one crucial thing is a lot of variety. So usually, as I said, if people fail, it's because they're not eating enough, basically. So if you make sure that you eat enough, and that means to just look for, if you're struggling with it, you just have to look for things that are more calorie dense. Like my favorite example is peanuts. Not because I'm terribly into peanuts, but peanuts is just a great example because we usually see it as a snack. But it also comes, 100 grams of peanuts also comes with 25 grams of protein. So a quarter of the weight of peanuts is protein. That's actually more than a steak. So It has a lot of protein. Yeah, it has a lot of great fats. So it gives you also a lot of energy and calories to function. So you just have to look for these things that are calorie dense, that give you a lot of protein. And it's the same thing. It's really not any different from what I was doing when I was still eating meat. When I was still eating meat, I would look for things that are high protein and give me a lot of calories. And I'm still doing the same thing. I'm just choosing, plant foods.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. We must have you on again at some point in the future so we can talk some more. You're an absolute inspiration. Thank you, Patrik.
I'd love that. Thank you.
Well, that's it from us for this week. Don't forget to subscribe on your platform of choice and leave us a review. You can also follow us on Instagram at Simply Vegan Podcast. We'll see you on Tuesday when myself and Molly will be back with our usual vegan chat.